This is an interesting session. Presents a lot of interesting concepts, some which are, I guess, some people might find controversial.
I hope not, but yes.
To kick things off, by way of introduction, Steve.
A lot of you know me already from the previous session. My name is Stephen Forte. My Twitter handle is works on my PC, mostly because I've done a lot of outsourcing to India. See, I love crowds like this because they actually understand what that Twitter handle means. And I'm a loud New Yorker.
My name's John. I'm originally from Canada, so it should make for an interesting dynamic up here.
Canadian and American.
Yeah, that's right. Brothers in arms. I'm the polite Canadian, so I'll apologize for all of Stephen's mishaps during the entire session. And you can follow me online as well. I'm a bit of a clown on Twitter, so there you go. We both work for a company called Teleric. Anyone here using our products or tools? I hope you are.
Wow.
Fantastic.
How come not everyone, John?
Well, at the end of the session, hopefully you will. We have a pretty action-packed session here today. And just to set the stage here, our agenda is as follows. We're going to basically set the story of what we like to call an Agile buffet table. The idea here is that there's a lot of methodologies out there that you can pick and choose from. And some you can obviously adhere to strictly. But the idea here is that in the sense of Agile, you have a lot of different methodologies to pick from. And so we have, in order to set the story, we need to actually identify those ones that are relevant to us. And as we go through them, start identifying those things that are positives, that are strengths. And then moving on from there, try to identify those aspects of those Agile methodologies that we want to use and incorporate in our development methodology. From there, we're going to take a look at how we can actually incorporate those methodologies individually and combine them, much like we do when we go to a buffet, and start incorporating those aspects together to provide a much better or stronger and more realistic scenario for us in our environment. And then we'll take a look at some scenarios at the end where we're going to pose some hypotheticals. And this is really where we want you to participate. We're going to pose some scenarios where obviously they're going to be relevant to you. And we're going to look at how we can actually start incorporating the various methodologies, the parts and pieces that we like, the parts and pieces maybe we don't want to incorporate, we can throw those out, and see how we can construct these and make them basically particular to ourselves. Anything you want to add there?
Oh, perfect.
All right. That did not go through.
It did. It just was highlighting.
So just wanted to basically start by talking a little bit about the Agile Manifesto. This has been around since February 2001.
Yeah, 12 years.
Yep. So
12 and a half years.
Yeah, it's been around for quite a while. The Agile Manifesto is, if you haven't seen it, you can go to agilemanifesto.org. Lots of signatories there. They're still taking signups, I would imagine. Although if you haven't heard about it, you can go check it out there. And the idea here is that it's just basically a set of values that are basically there for encouraging communication within a project. And the idea with the Agile Manifesto is that there was a lot of things that were being done back in the day with software development, and in order to quantify what we want as critical success factors, we need to identify those things that were positives in our environment. And so a lot of guys got together back in February 2001 in Utah and started coming up with these basic visions of what a software development could entail. And in fact, if you go online today, there are a range of values that basically are there for you to look at and take in as concepts for that idea. Anything you?
Well, I'll start talking about as John said, the Agile Manifesto deals with more values over rules. So my background is I've had always by accident, I've been involved with Agile since the beginning, since the late 90s. I was an early adopter of XP, early adopter of Scrum, and I was actually one of the early signatories of the Agile Manifesto. I actually went up and looked at it recently, and it was actually my old Hotmail account where I signed up, and I'm like, I think, number 400 or something that have signed the document. And I know some of the people who've signed the document because now I'm on the board of directors of the Scrum Alliance. So I get to hang out with Jeff Sutherland and Mike Cohn and some of the people who were there at the beginning. And one of the things that they say is, besides a lot of alcohol being drank at that ski resort in Utah, and they said, hey, let's create a manifesto, is they really were stressing the values of Agile. because this was, 2001. It was at the dot-com crash. We still had predominantly waterfall. And waterfall is all about these rules and steps and procedures. You can go out and get a PMI certification. And they really, back 12 and a half years ago, were concerned about the values over rules. Rules are important, of course, for society to function. But values are even more important because sometimes we start following the rules for the sake of following the rules, even if those rules are outdated or a little bit of, what's the right word? Some of those rules may have some, tweaking because they're just, over time they haven't gotten there. And the most important thing that, Mike Cohn tells me, and he's, one of the original guys there, he goes, why do we have these brands, right? XP, Scrum, Kanban, all these other brands, Prince 2. He goes, why do we have these brands? Why can't it just be Agile? And in essence, that's what this session is going to talk about to some degree. We're going to try to say the era of the Agile brands are over. The era of going out and getting a certified Scrum Master or certified Kanban Master. Is there such thing as a certified Kanban Master? Sensei, I guess they might call it, or something like that. Or in John and my opinion, but it's not just the two of us. There's a couple other colleagues of ours inside of Telerik. We're a large organization, 800 people. Right? So it's not just like it's John and me and 3 friends. I mean, we're a global organization on, about 10 different offices, I believe. So within Telerik, we have a lot of other thought leaders in Agile that agree with this, plus my colleagues on the board of directors and inside the Scrum Alliance, which is a little odd that people inside the Scrum Alliance, where our sole mission in life is to promote the concept of Scrum. The thought leaders and the board members are thinking now about moving away from that as our mission as an organization. Let's go to our next slide there.
Yeah.
So how many folks, you guys can't clap, you know what I mean. Quick show of hands. How many people have signed the Agile Manifesto themselves? Okay, about 7 people in a room of about 100. So everyone here has homework. All right. Next question. How many folks have read the Agile Manifesto at agilemanifesto.org? Okay. Only about, what did you say, about 40%, John?
About that.
About 40%. So everyone's homework is to go read the Agile Manifesto. And if those of you who rose your hand, reread it again, because it's very simple. It takes you 10 minutes to read it. So agilemanifesto.org. And you can actually click on, well, there's the 12 principles of Agile software. You can actually go in and put your email address and sign it. Your homework isn't necessarily to go in and sign it, but your homework is to go read it. And look at the principles and look at those core values. And in my opinion, one of the most important principles of the Agile Manifesto is responding to change. And that's where Mike Cohn keeps talking about the Agile Manifesto and the brands. He goes, we keep getting stuck into religion over, in the beginning it was about XP, then we get stuck in the religion over Scrum. And a lot of times someone will go, that's not Agile. And when someone says that's not Agile, in my opinion, they're the ones not being Agile, because they're actually closed-minded to the change. So in essence, that's what we're advocating here. So John says he hopes we're not being controversial. That's the Canadian. I actually hope we're being controversial. I actually hope you're going to tweet, wow, this Bristow Forte guys are crazy. What are they doing? Because we're actually challenging some of the thought leadership today that prevails in the Agile methodology.
I'm trying to do the good cop, bad cop thing.
Yeah, you're good at the good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, so I mean, the nature of software is it's always changing. And as we know, requirements are always constantly changing as well. So Agile, by necessity, is all about embracing change. And as I said before, it's about these set of values that we can prescribe to a software development process. That's not to say that one set of values are the be-all, end-all, but that we certainly value certain aspects of Agile development in our processes and make them such. All right.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to buy the food. And we're going to spend the next 10 minutes, for some of you it's going to be review, but John and I are just going to review the 3 core Agile methodologies. And you'll see the method to our madness in about 15 minutes from now, once we actually review these 3 cores. And even if you're sitting in the room and you're a certified Scrum Master and have been using Scrum or lean principles for years, chances are you don't know all the bullets that we're going to put up. And we put them up for a reason, because these are going to be the items we're going to put on the buffet table. So we're going to go, as I said, go a quick review of XP, Scrum, and Kanban. And then after that, we're going to actually open it more up to you. We're going to do an interaction of building an Agile methodology. So I'll let John start off with XP and Scrum, and then I'll circle back and do Kanban.
Right. So when we talk about these Agile methodologies, certainly there are many out there. The three predominant ones that we've mentioned. Certainly, in reference to XP, this is certainly one that you'll see a few people adopt. I think you asked in the previous session how many people are using XP. We had about a handful of people,
I think about four people
using XP. There are some good things in XP, and certainly, to share with you a little anecdote. Back in the day when I started out, there were aspects of XP that appealed to me. So I graduated from university back in the late lot Around that time, Kent Beck was prescribing these practices.
That seemed radical at the time.
That's right. But a lot of these things we already were instilling. I was working at a company where we did continuous integration before it was really known as such. We were doing multi-platform compiler tools for all variants of Linux and Windows. And you can guess who got the Windows side. That was me. This was before even Cygwin, so we had no concept of fork. We had to use create process and things like that. But the idea there was that we were using continuous integration as part of that process to basically do builds every time there was a check-in. And other engineering concepts around XP, like continuous integration and others, really were really good efficiencies in the development process. But one of the aspects of XP that really was a bit of a struggle was the fact that it was so engineering focused. So taking a look at some of these core practices, I mean, I'm sure some of these are still in use today. Certainly, I mentioned the concept of continuous integration. There are some wonderful tools that are out there that allow you to deliver on these aspects of XP. Slack has this notion of putting in some minor work items within your backlog to account for any changes so that you can remove them for an iteration. The concept of weekly cycles or quarterly cycles for iterations as well. These and other core practices to XP were important back in the day and still continue to be important. But the problem here is that XP is very engineering focused. So
And I'll add to that real briefly, is back in the dot-com era, around the same time John was graduating university and picking up Kent Beck's book, Extreme Programming, I was running a shop which was at the time mostly waterfall. Actually, it wasn't mostly waterfall, it was waterfall. And we decided to do XP. There's a whole funny story involved of why we decided to do XP, mostly around the concept of, the informative workplace and the whole team sitting together. And it had to do with, I got a paintball injury and I couldn't walk. And I was kind of like walking like this. And I had to go talk to the very attractive lady in marketing. I was the chief technology officer. So I wound up actually just co-locating by accident because I couldn't walk. I was on crutches. And I had to meet with her 3 or 4 times a day. And when I started sitting with her, my team would start coming and asking me questions. I was sitting next to her because I was trying to ask her out, to be completely honest. Agile is about transparency.
This is being recorded, right? Your wife's
this is being recorded. Awesome. Luckily for me, actually, I was going to joke and say that's how I met my wife, but no. Luckily for my wife knows all my crazy stories, or just doesn't care to watch TechEd videos. That said, so I can say anything I want, like about the strip club John and I went to last night. Oh wait, your wife watches these videos. Sorry. Sorry. There's my Canadian coming out. There you go. So what happens is I was sitting next to the marketing lady, and my team would come and ask me questions. And I trained my team very well that they would always come to me and say, we can't do this. Here are 2 or 3 options. And I would tell them to do option 2, and then the marketing person would say, whoa. And she would be the equivalent today of a product owner. Be like, no, Steve's wrong. Do option number 3. And that's when we started, without even realizing it, we were doing the sitting together of the whole team. And we started also integrating a lot of the other XP practices. But the one other thing I wanted to add before John moves ahead with Scrum is XP definitely has seen its day. It's not popular anymore. And in my opinion, not because it's a bad methodology, but because we take it for granted. When I was still CTO of this company, this dot-com company, I had to beg and plead with my developers to check in code. I had to beg and plead to do coding standards and all this other stuff. So that's why pair programming was very important. You had that peer pressure. But now we take a lot of this for granted because of TFS. We have gated check-ins. We have FX cop. We have style cop. We have all this stuff that makes us kind of enforce this. I used to joke and say I was the CEO, Chief Enforcement Officer. And I'm not kidding. I wrote an article in SD Times about a year ago that said, I honestly, as CTO in 1999, spent more than a third of my time enforcing the engineering rules and practices in the organization, which seems insane today, right? Because we take it for granted. So XP solved a big problem. Once it solved those engineering problems, I think the next problem that we decided to solve was the communication problem. Because developers would rather sit in an isolated room, never talk to anyone, insert pizza under the door, out comes code. And Scrum, which John is now going to talk about, makes us talk to each other, right? So why don't you?
Yeah, so, talking about Scrum, I'm going to assume that everyone knows about Scrum. How many people here are employing this in their organization today? Okay, just about everyone.
Yeah.
So Scrum is basically, it has a number of core tenets to it. It's basically there to enhance communication within your environment. The idea here is that we iterate against our backlog through these known sprints. These are fixed times of work against these work items that we have. I'll use work items synonymously with stories or whatever. But basically, the core tenets here of Scrum is to provide this iterative process where we can communicate with the stakeholders, in some respects, what's actually going on with the project. And one of the side benefits that's really nice about this, if you employ what Mr. Forte here was saying in his previous session, is that you can do re-estimation for each sprint, allowing you to be more accurate in your estimations, using that cone of uncertainty to your advantage, as he said.
He says it, not me. You don't have to clap.
So these things turn out to be incredibly important, and I come from more of a developer's background. So I don't. Do you consider yourself a developer anymore?
Do I consider myself a developer?
I actually like the idea of iterations, the ability to deliver software that's functional, that's been tested and is well designed on a fixed timeline in an iterative process turns out to be really nice and allows me to develop what's called cadence. So cadence is something that I think a lot of developers can appreciate because it allows you to feel like you're getting stuff done. Moreover than that, though, Scrum really does have that side benefit of increasing transparency and visibility to everyone involved in the project. And so we have these various role owners involved in Scrum. And you can see how this differs slightly from XP, whereas XP is more focused on the engineering side of aspects, so things like TDD and other aspects themselves. Scrum is more about the process and some of the things that go on within an organization. So this idea of a daily stand-up, where we go through and we talk to every individual for a brief period of time about what they're working on. So, yeah. Anything to add to that?
Not much, except that at the Scrum Alliance, sitting at the board level, we talk to the certified trainers that go out around the world and train all of the certified Scrum Masters and the certified product owners. And the size of the Scrum Alliance, I said in the last session, we have 300,000 certified Scrum Masters. So we have a lot of trainers that train all of them. And one of the things that we keep hearing back is that a lot of the assumptions around Scrum, people are now coming into the classes where it was a revolutionary concept to say things like, oh, talk to each other and do things in iterations, is no longer considered revolutionary. Meaning if you get a room full, a trainer is in Auckland or New York or Hong Kong or wherever, and a trainer 10 years ago teaching Scrum would have assumed that they have to really stress the importance of doing the things John just said, basically all these bullet points, right? Time box it, do the iteration, do the re-estimation at the end of every sprint. And they said today, a lot of those concepts they're coming to the class already with. And the reason is because we've done a good job over the last 10 years of pushing Agile and moving away from waterfall. So I think that, as I said, XP represented the past. It was the influential methodology in the mid to late 90s. Mostly it had its heyday during the dot-com boom. You would go up and down University Avenue in Palo Alto, and every one of those startups was using XP. No one was using Waterfall. I think Scrum definitely has its heyday right now. In my opinion, it hit its peak. And as I said, XP came and went mostly because it's mission, plant a flag, mission accomplished. And I actually think Scrum, you can plant the flag today, say mission accomplished. Developers talk to each other, they collaborate, and they now talk with the business. The concept of doing short iterative cycles is to foster communication. I always say, how many people, I always make you raise your hand. I said, how many people work in a dysfunctional organization? Right? Oh, okay, let's do that. Because this is when I used to teach Scrum 10 years ago. How many people do work in a dysfunctional organization? Okay, I love the honesty. How many people are sitting next to their boss? Okay, so you can assume all those people work in a dysfunctional organization as well.
Actually, that's good. That's communication.
That is communication. And I make the argument that Scrum will actually make your dysfunction worse. It exposes that dysfunction sooner. In 2 or 3 sprints, you realize, oh my goodness, this person's horrible, or this process is crazy, or the boss is insane, or the expectations are not aligned, whatever it is, the budget's wrong, whatever it is, that will get exposed sooner, giving you the opportunity to make those decisions sooner. So it pushes that communication. So I think, as I said, a lot of these things are now starting to be taken for granted, and that's why I feel that Kanban, or I'm the American accent, I say Kanban, which I have no excuse because I live in Asia, and I travel to Japan fairly often, so I really should say it the correct way. But Kanban, I actually think potentially could represent the next level or the next stage of evolution in the community's adoption. As I said, at the Scrum Alliance, we see more and more requests for students that want Kanban electives, to maintain their certified Scrum professional or their certified Scrum Master status. So I'm going to have a quick question. How many people are familiar with Kanban? Wow. That is the most, I would say that's like 85%. Oh, good. So I won't have to actually go into it too deeply. Usually, maybe just because time has elapsed, usually I say Kanban and like 3 people raise their hands. That's excellent. How many people are using some form of Kanban in their environment? Wow. Okay. That is astonishing. That's got to be, 40%, 30%? Yeah. So let's look at the other methodologies. Let's do XP first. I'm sure it'll be like maybe only a handful of folks. How many people are using like pure XP, iterations, extreme programming? No one. Oh, 1 person, 2 people total. Okay, that's about what I expected. XP is, I still think, pretty awesome, but it's very engineering focused. So if you're working in a very, Google, actually, believe it or not, uses a lot of, what they do is weird. They do their own buffet table, but it looks a lot like XP. And then how many folks are using Scrum? Okay, almost the same as in Kanban. So yeah. I'm guessing that people are already doing what John and I are going to advocate in about 2 slides. So I'm not going to go too deep into Kanban, but again, the reason why John and I decided to review these slides is not only to bring everyone up to speed, because some of you might know Scrum and Kanban, but not XP. Besides that is to have these particular bullet points, because as I said, it'll all become clear to you in about 5 or 10 minutes when we start talking about the buffet table. So just to review, the core tenet, there's actually 2 core tenets of Kanban. These are the 5 kind of Kanban principles. Right, so define and visualize a workflow. What's really important is the last bullet. So look at the first bullet, define your workflow, forget about the middle 3 for a second, and look at the last bullet. Use models to suggest improvement, meaning changing the process as part of the process. So while Scrum has a set of rules, I always say, if we tell you to have a meeting every day, we tell you what to say in the meeting, and we tell you how long the meeting should be. We even tell you the exact time of day you're supposed to have the meeting. That is not pretty agile, right? That sounds very rigid and formulaic, right, to me, right? Scrum, you have a lot of people who have a lot invested in Scrum, certified Scrum Masters included, and they want to keep the rules of Scrum the same. I respect that. You don't want to dilute the brand, but Kanban or Kanban has these principles, and changing Kanban is built into Kanban, right? Changing Scrum is not built into Scrum. You change Scrum, you have people like Ken Schwaber calling you a Scrum butter, right? So changing Kanban is the first rule of Kanban is define a process, and then have things to measure that process, and then change the process on a regular basis, like a Kaizen event. The other 2 things about Kanban that are really important that we'll review before we kind of move on is that it throws the concept of an iteration out the door. So XP sort of invented the iteration. Scrum definitely formalized it and then called it a sprint. Kanban, there is no iteration. It's just constantly pulling items through the system. So the concept of the 2-week iteration or the 1-month iteration goes away with Kanban. But more importantly, and this is the fundamental thing, if you've never studied lean manufacturing or Kanban in particular, we always think we can do things and should do things in batch. So in Scrum, we'll take 10 items out of the backlog. If you listen to my last session, I kept talking about taking 10 story points worth of stuff out of the backlog, working on it, creating velocity, blah, blah, blah. In Kanban, there's no concept of batch. It's all about what they call flow, and this comes directly from lean manufacturing. Just to take a quick step back, literally, is back after World War II, the Americans built lots of cars in batch. And then they sold a lot of cars. But then they also didn't sell a lot of cars. They would sit on the lot at the end of the year and have massive sales. The Japanese could not afford those economies of scales that the Americans could. Right? The Americans did not have a damaged infrastructure due to the war, so the Americans had lots of resources, lots of people. Japan was recovering from the war. So they decided to build the cars based on demand. So when someone ordered a blue, Nissan, they would start pulling one blue Nissan through the system. So literally the whole concept of just-in-time delivery and building things as they were requested by the customers was invented in Japan in the end of World War II as a response to the lack of resources. They realized that it was quite efficient because they only built what was needed, and they didn't have these kind of like fire sales at the end of the season selling all of the unused inventory. So that brings up another one of the points, which is number 2 in Kanban, which is limit work in progress. What that really means is as you define your process, you have these swim lanes that says, maybe like testing, coding, blah, blah, blah. And it says you can only have a certain amount of items in those queues at any given time. And the point is to look for your constraints. Meaning is if you have a limit that says the developers can only be working on 3 story points at a time or 3 work items at a time, and in front of the developers in the queue is the designers, and the designers are sitting there twiddling their thumb, well, you have a constraint. You have a constraint that you either have too few developers or too many designers. And you have now, the last bullet point, the opportunity to change your process. So just to review, is Kanban is about defining a workflow, pulling individual items through the system individually, and not doing it in a time box. And then how do you do it? You basically distill all your work items down to the same size, which is easy to do when you're building cars, right? But Toyota has a Prius, so they have electric cars, they have SUVs, they have minivans, they have trucks. So then they have a Kanban process for each one of those. So I make the argument we can do the same thing. We can have small, medium, and large. And a small goes through the system, let's say in 24 hours. A medium goes through the system in, let's just say, 48 hours, and a large goes through the system in 72 hours. And we pull these items through the system based on demand. So instead of having a product backlog and every 2 weeks taking a number of items out of the product backlog, you're doing it constantly. You're doing it literally maybe every day. And you get through a cadence. At the end of the cadence, you can do a release. Maybe after 2 or 3 weeks, you'll start doing a release on a regular basis. So Kanban is actually a lot different than Scrum and XP. I actually think they can work together pretty nicely, and that leads us into where we're going with this, because I'm not trying to sell you on Kanban. John was not trying to sell you on Scrum and XP. What we want to do now is say, now that we've put onto the table Scrum, XP, and Kanban, all those bullet points, now let's start talking about actually building the Agile buffet table itself. So here's a slide. I know it's about 2 years old, and basically the question was, what process are you using? And are you using Agile, Waterfall, and then Iterative? I'm not even sure what Iterative is, but this is the logic of Gartner Group and Forrester, the people that ask these questions. So they say 35% of people are using Agile, but 31% are using no process. So then we started investigating more. And John will talk about this slide right here.
Yeah, so the reality is that mixed methods are the norm. There's no strict adherence to one or the other, that a large chunk of groups are actually incorporating a mix of Agile methodologies. You've got some groups who are doing a mix of Agile and non-Agile, and then there's that remaining third that's adhering to a single Agile methodology itself. These surveys are interesting in the sense that they gain the pulse of what's going on out there. But the point worth noting here is the fact that mixed methods are the norm, that you can actually pick and choose those aspects that are worth looking at and worth incorporating as part of your development methodology. The thing I like to talk to this in terms of software when talking to developers is that change is the norm. Agile methodologies out there incorporate some good practices. It's much like natural selection. Those who don't actually change and adhere to the environment, natural selection takes its course, and that software is no longer part of our ecosystem. So in order to adapt and change with the growing times, we need to make sure that our methodologies incorporate that.
A Canadian quoting Charles Darwin. I like that. So where does this lead us? We asked you before, how many people using Kanban? And about 80% of the room raised their hand. Then we said, how many people using Scrum? And about 80% of the room raised their hand. So I'm saying that you guys fall into this mixed category right here, most likely. Some people like to formalize it and say Scrum Ban or things like that. And what John and I are saying is we don't care. We're here today to tell you is throw all of those labels and brands aside and build a methodology to suit the project and the team, the project you're working on with the team you're working on for the customer that you're working for and what you're actually delivering. So meaning if you're a large organization, you might have 2 or 3 different processes. You won't be using Scrum in each of them. You'll be using some form of mixed methodology in each of them. In essence, lying out on the buffet table all the features of XP, all the features of Kanban, all the features of Scrum, and putting them into the buffet table and then taking off what you need. Now, we always get the question, John and I always get this question, how do you eat healthy? Because the problem is when I travel, so the problem is my wife actually arrived last night. So yesterday morning, and she didn't come to breakfast. I had breakfast with Adam Kogan this morning. So this morning and yesterday morning, I had like a kilo of bacon. My wife does not allow me to eat bacon. So when I travel, I go to the buffet, and I don't see a buffet. I just see the bacon. I think my wife is onto something. Having a kilo of bacon for breakfast is probably not that healthy.
It's very agile, though.
It is very agile, because when she's around, I have the fruit.
Yep.
And the yogurt. And the omelet.
Just don't take the steam tray next time.
I do take the entire steam tray. It's a little embarrassing, to be completely honest. So how do you eat healthy? You eat healthy when you build your process adhering to the values of the Agile Manifesto. So when you build your process, you can build a process that's all messed up. And when you look at that process and you start seeing what's wrong, it's when you're gut checking it against the principles of the Agile Manifesto that John brought up on the slide, or actually on the website just a little while ago. So that's how you eat healthy. So what we're going to do is eat from the buffet table. So we're going to do a little exercise, and this may or may not go over well. John told me kiwis are fun. Is that true? This is only my second time to New Zealand. The first time was 20 years ago, so it was a much different environment back then.
So just to clarify, my wife is from Rotorua, and my sons are both, what?
I have Kiwi passports.
Yeah, they're both Kiwi and Canadian, and so they're a lively bunch, and they like to be interactive and stuff. So that's the story I was sharing.
That was the story he was sharing. He just said Kiwis are fun. So we're going to test if Kiwis are fun. Are any non-Kiwis in the room? Where are you guys from? Other places. So these are the people that don't necessarily have to participate to make John look honest when he said Kiwis are fun. The other 90% of the room has to participate. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do the following. We've got about 20 minutes or so to go. 25 minutes, actually, which is perfect timing. This is exactly where we want it to be. We've laid out, we set the table, we've bought the food, we've put everything onto the buffet table. Now what we're going to do is eat. And we're going to have at least 3 meals. We're going to try for 3 meals. We probably have time for 3 meals. The first meal is my wife is here, meaning she's going to tell us what to eat, so to speak. And then we're going to let you tell us what to eat. So here's our first scenario, is we're going to give you this scenario, but then you're going to build the methodology with us. And John, all you were in my last session, you realize I don't know how to type anymore. So John is going to do the typing for at least this first one. So the first scenario is we have a remote team. Oops.
Sorry.
John, you took away my scenario.
Sorry.
We have a remote team in a different time zone, meaning is we're supporting, well, what that really means is we have a remote team supporting users in a different time zone. I'm thinking that's pretty common here in New Zealand. We tried to choose a scenario that would work in New Zealand. We think that since New Zealand is far away from everything, including Hong Kong, which I thought was far away from everything, and it took me 10 hours to get here. So you have a remote team supporting people in different time zones. And I thought because, New Zealand is famous for its greenery, the scenery of all the trees, this would be a greenfield project. Please, someone laugh. I worked hard on that one. Right? And that you guys are either, we're going to just say it's contractors, right? That you're actually working for an external source. So we have the answer that we think is the right scenario, but let's go in and do this together. So John, pull up an Excel spreadsheet. Do we need to write down that scenario again? Everyone's got it? We are a bunch of Kiwis and 10% non-Kiwis that rose their hand here, working here in New Zealand for users that are overseas. They're either in Australia or Asia, US, what have you. So users in a different time zone. So our product owner, is our product owner overseas?
Yeah, let's make them overseas.
Oh, wow, okay, that's going to be...
Why not?
No, I'm just saying, that's going to be more fun. Greenfield projects, so we're starting from scratch. And we're contractors, right? So we are billing by the hour, we're billing by, whatever it is, time and materials. So, first up, let's go back to XP. What are some of the core things from XP that will work in this environment? And maybe we can pull up the XP slide to go do that. So you're going to have to do this once or twice, John.
That's not a problem.
We can do that fancy Windows 8. I've read somewhere that Windows 8 lets you have 2 screens up at one time.
Yeah, so you can... oh, geez.
Sure.
So
is there anyone on the Windows 8 team in the room?
Dude, it's all right. We're in presenter mode, so that's a whole new
That's going to screw things up. Oh, so maybe we can't use that feature of Windows 8.
So,
okay, so here's to refresh everyone's memory. So from XP, we're not going to tell you. We will tell you what we have a slide, the next slide. We're going to tell you what we think is a good outcome from this, but you guys are building it for us. We're doing this in theory. Which concepts of XP do you think we should have in this particular project? So as you shout them out, we're going to agree or disagree, and John's going to write down the ones that us as a group disagree. I've done this in Japan, and it didn't work well. Everyone just sat there like this. So I'm hoping that you guys are more energetic than the Japanese. So go ahead. Stories, user stories. Everyone thinks user stories are good, right? In this case? Good. User stories. Obviously, sit together is not going to work. What else? What else? Well, hold on. I heard one in the back. Let me get that one first. Informative workspace. Yes. I think an informative workspace is the precursor of the electronic boards, right? I mean, it's very much so. Okay. We had something over here. Incremental design, perfect. What about TDD? We're all in favor of TDD. What about CI? Okay. Cycles, I don't know. Well, I'll let you guys. What else? Slack. Okay. Slack is good. Anything else? Should we go to Scrum now? Okay. John? Oh,
all
this
right.
would be a challenge.
Oh, geez. All right.
That's why there's very few slides.
Boom. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
Really? I get a clap for that?
John, they were clapping when I said the words cone of uncertainty. So they're very... See? Hey!
So here's my ego taking over now. Oh, great. Yeah, just type
What you didn't tell me, John, is the key will clap at anything. You just say, guys, clap, and they just start clapping. Right? So, now they won't do it. Okay, unfortunately, the presenter mode has pushed this over that we can't see.
No.
John is superhuman Excel skills. Trust me, there's a reason why John is here. John is here not just to accommodate my lack of presenter and Excel skills.
Jesus.
He is an expert in this category here. Now, the original plan, when we talked about this on Skype and this morning, was that I would not be the MC and he'd be the MC for the next one. I'm not sure how we're going to do that. John might have to talk and type at the same time. Okay.
Can be done.
It can be done. So what are we going to get from Scrum? Daily stand-up. Okay. Everyone think that's a good idea? How do we do a daily stand-up with people 14 time zones away? What? I heard Skype. I heard someone else say something other than Skype, though. Oh, Link. Link. Come on. Are you on the Link team? So in my company, they make us use Link. And someone told me, it says on Link that you've been away for over 1,000 days. That shows you how much I use Link. And I was so happy when Microsoft bought Skype because I thought any IT administrators in the room? Because I don't want to say this too loud, but I feel that IT administrators take all the fun out of things that are fun. Like we said, hey, IT administrators, we want to use Dropbox. And then they sign us up to some version of locked down Dropbox that was more like Notebox. So I tell my wife that the IT guys take away everything. They make me have passwords on my phone, let's remote wipe your phone if you forget your password 3 times. So daily stand-up.
Jesus Christ.
Daily stand-up using Skype, not Link, right? Okay. What about Google Hangouts? Can we use Google Hangouts? That good? What else? So what about the concept? So here's the key, because we have Kanban is next. The concept of iterations, time boxing. In a remote environment, greenfield project, what are your thoughts? Everyone shaking their head? Okay, so iterations. So sprints / iterations. John, you don't have to actually type what I say. You can type what they say.
All right.
So we have Scrum, we have me. What about sprint retrospective? So sprints, oh, by the way, of a fixed duration? Yep, okay, because I taught you how important that was in the last session. Not dynamic. What about cross-functional teams? Yes, okay. I'm not a huge fan of that, personally. Cross-functional teams. I was told, I went out with some Agile folks for dinner Tuesday night, and they told me in New Zealand they have a lot of cross-functional teams because a lot of people don't necessarily in New Zealand specialize as they do in the States because the market's a lot smaller here. And I found that pretty fascinating because at Telerik, our teams are not cross-functional. We say they're cross-functional, but they clearly are not. We have a true designer, true DBA, true all those folks. Anything else from Scrum that stands out? Product owner. All right.
This is good.
Should we move on to Kanban? Backlog. Okay. Backlog theoretically should be a bullet here. I guess it is. Oh yeah, this one's backlog, yeah. Retrospectives. Yes. So it looks like we like Scrum here. Cool. Give me the fictitious name of our organization. Northwind. I was once doing a keynote in Hong Kong at like a TechEd, and it was a role playing. And I was supposed to be in a Starbucks, and like someone was going to call me up, and I was going to show them using like all these fancy features, like I don't know how to drill down, like in SharePoint. And then at the last minute they say you're not allowed to say Starbucks. We can get sued if you say Starbucks. So I said no problem. And I had my MVP mug. And because I was sitting on the stage, but I was actually broadcast on a webcast because they're supposed to be calling me in the Starbucks. And I have the MVP mug, and I put it into the webcam, and they go, "Where are you, Steve?" And I go, "I'm in Northwind Coffee Shop." Right? And I show the MVP. Everyone thought it was funny, except the people at Microsoft. Okay, because you think my IT guys have no sense of humor. You should talk to people who work at Microsoft or used to work at Microsoft. Okay, John, Kanban. So do we like the concept of, let's say, work in project or managing flow or maybe the Kaizen model of using the models to do improvement? What do we say? Any of these? Oh, some of them say all of them. Whoa, that's a lot. Because then we're just doing Kanban, the Scrumban. You can't actually do all of them and do all of this, right? The steam tray, the bacon.
Yeah, take all the bacon.
Okay, so people like these. So let's do a vote. Limiting work in progress? Yes? Okay. So by limiting work in progress, you are implicitly saying you're using models to suggest improvement, right? Right. So we'll just shorten that to Kaizen, which is the Japanese for self-improvement. So I should have put Kaizen in a parentheses there.
Yeah.
So visualized workflow. We actually didn't write that anywhere, but do we believe in a visualized workflow? Yep. And we're agreeing, by limiting the work in progress, the consequence of that, the only benefit you get from limiting the work in progress is identifying bottlenecks and then changing your process. So then I'm suggesting, so I don't want to force you, but someone did say all, is then use the models, which is Kaizen, which we already wrote. So just say Kaizen. Everyone will. The last bullet, we can just shorten to Kaizen. Okay.
Excuse me.
I think we have a process. It's a bit of a Frankenstein process. We will call this the TechEd. What's our session number? A2307? Does anyone know the session number? 306? 307. That is the 307 process. You guys can tweet that now. You can be like, I just went to TechEd and we learned the best process. It's going to destroy Kanban, destroy Scrum. It's the 307. There you go, 307 process. So let's go back to the slides. And, oh yeah, that's right. One more, two more.
It's okay.
So this was our scenario. Oops.
Nope.
Yeah. That was our scenario. So let's look at what John and I hacked together, over Skype, right? So if you look, we were pretty close, but we didn't actually go as deep. So one of the things we said is, from XP, we're going to go with user stories.
Yep.
You guys said user stories. We suggested pair programming, but we're hardcore geeks, so maybe we're just showing our gray hair.
And I suggested CI because I'm a huge believer in it. I think if you're not doing CI, you're really missing out.
So we got 2 out of 3 from what they suggested. From Scrum, we said use sprints, and we did say fixed duration. Right? So I was trying to fool you guys when I said, I was trying to fool you around. And we did say do the virtual Scrum meeting. Okay? And from Kanban, we actually chose the exact same things, the work in progress limits, right? Which then by definition, you can't really have one without the other. I mean, you can, but if you choose work in progress limits, that means you're definitely going to go through the Kaizen. So we were pretty good. You guys added a fair amount more. To be honest, we probably would have added those if the slide could hold them. We're trying to follow the 10, 20, 30 rule of PowerPoint, right? I have no font lower than 30. We do okay with this session. Not too bad. This is probably 18 or 20 font. So you guys did pretty well. Let's now the next slide, which is really the last slide, or the penultimate slide. This is where it gets fun, because we gave you a scenario. So I was supposed to type, but I think I think we can all agree.
I can type and talk.
I think John's going to type and talk. So John, maybe I'll just keep emceeing and John will interject as well, but John will type and talk. So live without a net. You guys give us a scenario, and we're going to build a process together with that scenario. So someone starts shouting out a scenario. You should see what we've gotten in the past.
So just to recap, before we had a remote team in a different time zone, greenfield, and contractors.
So we can't use that scenario. And don't tell us a local team, enterprise development, brownfields, because that would be boring. But you can, if you want.
2 teams, one in New Zealand, one in London.
Wow, now they're getting hard. Okay, so 2 teams. Or you mean 1 team spread across 12 hours apart. So you gotten this down?
Yeah.
And I heard legacy system. Oof. You know, I'm going to get a cup of coffee, and you guys figure this one out. I'm going to come back, and John can type. You guys like John's typing better anyway, right? Like compared to my typing. All right, so we have a legacy brownfield. Oh my God, this is going to be hard. Policy-based, and let's just get, since we're masochists here, does this policy-based deadline come with a severe penalty? Yes. Oh, how fast the Kiwis are. John, you were correct. Everyone, a round of applause for yourself, because John said this would be fun, and by God, this is awesome. This actually, I've been doing this, John and I together have not done it many times, but I've been doing this for many years. This kind of interaction, building the process on the fly for at least 2 or 3 years. And I've not gotten one this difficult, which is good. Anything else while we're at it? Oh, wow. A product owner, a noob product owner. Which actually, to be honest, isn't that all product owners? I mean, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Hashtag just saying. Feel free to tweet that. Okay. Oh, so in the legacy, let's get creative. Is this legacy system, are you porting it and replatforming it, or is this a maintaining? Because that has implications. Okay, so I'm hearing mostly replatforming, so we'll go with that, which I guess is better.
Yeah.
Oh, God, you guys are killing us.
What?
Actually, no, this one's good. First time they're doing an Agile project in this organization. Is what? Well, isn't that implied? Actually,
this is like the worst project ever.
Actually, I'm calling BS on that one, because I actually, to be honest, replatforming isn't as hard as it sounds, because you have the requirements. You have a whole system, right? So unless you guys are really strong, I just think those are a little mutually exclusive. So I'm using executive privilege on that one, John. All right, what do you think, John? Wait, hold on. Here's the thing.
I think the guy who called out legacy is like, I want you to do my project.
Actually, the very first time I did this was oddly enough with another Canadian. And we were in Eastern Europe, and it was this beautiful Serbian woman. And she just described her project, which was actually pretty cool. I thought that maybe we should have charged her to come to the conference instead of actually we did. But meaning us as speakers should have charged her for the conference. Okay, remember, we've got, when does this end?
10 minutes.
So we have 10 minutes. So if we're fast, we can actually do one more. So let's cut it off here. and then go back and do XP. Do we need the screens up again, or can John just type? Like, do we remember what XP, comma? Okay, so from XP, what do we think in this environment would work? Oh, John, that's awesome. I think the best way to do this session is like in Eden Stadium, and I need 4 Jumbotrons. One Jumbotron has the bullets from XP, one Jumbotron with the bullets of Scrum, one Jumbotron has the bullets of Kanban, and then one Jumbotron, John typing. But we're here, so we're in Air Force One, or New Zealand One.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, XP. CI.
CI was mentioned,
Okay.
all right?
Anything else? We can't do pair programming if half the team's in London and half the team's in Auckland, right?
Dude, trust me, that 12-hour time difference is a killer. I have teams that I sync with in Bulgaria and in the US. You cannot find a perfect time
I know.
to sync. It's
My
crazy.
family's in New York City, and a lot of our customers are on the East Coast of the US, and Hong Kong is exactly 12 hours.
Yeah,
So,
it's the worst.
okay, so CI. I think obviously Slack is a generic one that almost always goes in one of them, so I'm going to suggest Slack.
why not?
Sure. Anything else? TDD, I think TDD is pretty darn good. That's one of those like CI Slack that should always come forward.
Yeah.
Anything else? Stories. Now, I'm going to challenge you real quickly. Do you need user stories when you're replatforming an existing system? Yes. Okay. They all said yes, John. There is no right or wrong answer. You've known
They're
this, right?
fun, but they also like a challenge. So yeah, don't push back too hard.
Don't
'cause
push back too hard.
They have a really good scrum. And
John tells me that New Zealand is the Canada of the South Pacific. I'm just saying.
I said
So
Kiwis are the Canadians of the Southern Hemisphere.
he just thinks he has this connection with you, and I'm just sensing I have a deeper connection with the audience than...
Jesus.
Okay, Scrum. It's really because I can't type. I get to do all the talking. He really was supposed to be leading it right now, but you don't want me typing. Scrum. Retrospectives. Good. I like that. What else? Informative workspaces XP.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah.
See, John has Excel challenges. I think it's Excel 2013 is the problem. Because a good worker always blames his or her tools. Right? Anything else from Scrum besides retrospectives? Daily stand-ups? Even with the 12-hour time zone difference? So you're okay with doing a daily stand-up at 6 in the morning? 9 in the morning, which is 9 p.m. in London. So I have yeses and nos. How about this? Put daily set with a question mark, because we haven't solved that yet, because we could do a show of hands.
Yep.
Anything else from Scrum? Fixed duration.
We're on a policy-based deadline.
Policy-based deadline. With fixed duration doesn't necessarily imply right, how one works with the other. I'm going to, anyone say fixed duration? 1 or 2 people. Because they're probably thinking what I'm thinking, which is the flow. So let's go over to Kanban and then see how we can address, because we're going to then go back and address all of our bullets here. Because John just reminded us, policy-based deadline. So Kanban. So only 3 people voted for fixed duration. So I'm assuming we want to use flow versus batch with no fixed duration. So I say no fixed duration. What else from Kanban do we want? Do we want work in progress limits? Okay. So WIP, that leads to Kaizen. Now, here's a quick challenge, though. And that's pretty much from the 3. We have retrospectives. What are we going, so the reason here is what retrospectives are we going to do if we have no fixed duration? Meaning is we could roll our retrospectives into our Kaizen, right? Meaning every 2 weeks we could just do a retrospective of how things are going, change the process. But let's go to our 2 teams. I think we addressed the 12 hours apart. Things like continuous integration, test-driven development, informative workspace help with the 12-hour time difference. Everyone agree? Right?
Also helps with legacy, for sure.
For sure helps for legacy. Anything else that we have for legacy? Excuse me?
Yeah, we have noobs. So we got to account for the noobs. So
I think we hit 1 and 2 pretty well, right? I don't think we have policy-based deadline and all the newbies just yet. So let's go back and maybe see how we can strengthen the process for that. So for a policy-based deadline, somebody suggests, or John was suggesting that maybe doing the fixed iterations was better for a policy-based deadline. But when we said no fixed duration because we're pulling items through, I think that actually probably works well, but we need to do something on that. Remember, if you were in my last session, we had that agile estimation. We need to hyper-focus on a deadline. So how can we account for that in this particular case? Is metrics. So on Kanban has the metric-based approach. Right, so using metrics using metrics in Kanban to actually, when you're pulling your items through the system. So if you remember, I talked about you had a Prius, and you had a SUV, and a truck, and a regular kind of fuel economy car, right? So using the metrics to then determine that eventually builds your Kaizen. So in this process, I would suggest, if I was brought in as an Agile coach, that something like this seems about right, but I would take those metrics with the Kaizen and the retrospective, and at the end of every week, do a reevaluation, right? So kind of taking in some of the principles of the Agile estimation that I mentioned in the previous course, if you were there. If you were not there, no big deal. It wasn't that good of a session. This is a much better session. Oh, wait, I was the speaker at both sessions. So I would actually, as John highlighted, that's how I would attack the policy-based deadline. You guys have any other suggestions? You have any suggestions, John?
No, this looks good.
Okay. So the next thing we need to address is the new product owner and the new Agile team. We can lump those together. So somebody said a daily stand-up. And I put question mark as I was challenging you more because of the time zone. I think the daily stand-up is important. Now, Scrum has a daily stand-up where the team, so if John and I are doing the daily stand-up, we look at each other, right, in Scrum. In Kanban, John and I are looking at the board, right? Because in Scrum, John and I are talking about what we did. In Kanban, it's on the board, so we're talking about the process on the board. I actually would argue that you'd want to do both. So you'd actually want to have a daily stand-up that does the Scrum values and the Kanban values. Because with the new people on the team, you constantly want to be checking in on that daily basis, is saying just, how's the process going? Because you have the work in progress limits. So I would say you'd have a daily stand-up here and a daily stand-up here.
Yep.
Right? One from both. And that's one way. We put in retrospectives, right? The retrospectives goes into the Kaizen event. And let me give a personal piece of advice. Is in an environment, forget about for just the moment of the other factors. Let's just think about the newness to the organization. I find introducing Agile to an organization is much easier with Kanban than with Scrum. Because Scrum is all about rules, and these are kind of revolutionary. You don't have project managers anymore. You have the project manager is split between a Scrum master and a product owner. You introduce terms that the users have no idea, like, we have a PMO, and what's a Scrum master going to do? In Kanban, the only rule is that there is no rules, or not really. The only rule of Kanban is that you're going to constantly be doing Kaizen and changing your process. So I actually think Kanban is easier for the noobs than Scrum. And you guys, because you guys did this, John and I didn't lead you, you guys chose much more Kanban than Scrum. XP is easy. We always see this. There's always going to be CI, Slack, informative workspace, right? Now, here's a question. Do we like this process? What do we want to call this process? Is what? The 307. We already have 307. I wanted to call this process the baby-faced assassin. Because that was actually an All Blacks rugby player I met in Australia in 1989. I think he actually had his name legally changed to the baby-faced assassin.
What?
Yeah. It's a long story. He might not have been on the All Blacks. But it was a New Zealand rugby player. So we don't have to call that. Let's just call this the badass Kiwi practice. Show of hands. Baby-faced assassin? No one. One guy. Two guys. I like you guys. Awesome. Badass Kiwi practice? All right, that sucks less. We'll give you one more to vote on because we have 5 minutes. We can squeeze one more out if we choose an easy one to do. Noob process. There you go, John. Noob process with regulatory controls. All right, how much time we have left? We have
1 minute.
1 minute, so I guess we can't do one more. Okay, with that, do we have any reading list? No, we just have questions. That is it. So to summarize, is we feel that having these brands is not really necessary anymore. Doing the exercise that John and I led you through is honestly what we both feel the future of the Agile movement is. Right? Any more concluding thoughts for that?
Yeah, just, be agile to agile, basically. So.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much. Please, please, please fill out your evaluation form. Apparently, they've invented the replicator, and you can instantly get an Xbox or a phone. You fill out your evaluation, and it just magically appears. You heard it from the New Yorker. Okay.